Don't forget about the argument analysis assignment listed on Blackboard that is due. I believe it is tomorrow, so make sure to complete that. The articles that you need to read are listed there on Blackboard, and they can be found through the ATLA religion database. Also, keep in mind that a week from tomorrow is when the research paper is due. Certainly, if there's any questions you have or any way I can help you between now and then, please get in contact with me about that. Let me know what I can do to help you with that. Related to that, of course, on Monday and Wednesday of next week, we will have our presentations. Face-to-face class signed up on Monday, so we have all that laid out. And then the online class has also been assigned. So we'll have several presentations on Monday and then several on Wednesday. And then that will take us through to Thanksgiving break, so coming up pretty quickly here. Then there's just a few things after Thanksgiving, especially the ministry reflection paper. Hopefully you have been reading through the Excellence book. We'll spend some time talking about that the Monday after Thanksgiving, maybe help you coalesce some of your thoughts as you think about revising from the previous paper. I would encourage you, if you did not take the time to look at my comments on your papers when they were originally submitted, you do so. And if you have any questions about that, please get in contact with me about that. Also want to remind you that with the student evaluations being available, that if the class gets 85% of those evaluations completed, that I will give everyone 15 points onto their final grade. Again, that's not percentage points, but that could still be quite helpful in the final part of the course. So please take the time to complete that. They are very useful to me. I do spend some time looking at those and trying to find ways to improve. Are there any questions about any of the upcoming assignments, the papers, or anything else that we're talking about?
Okay. The overall final research paper is due a week from today.
A week from tomorrow. Yeah, a week from tomorrow.
And just explain very clearly, what is Monday? About the research paper.
Monday is the presentations. All right, so there'll be presentations on Monday, and then there'll be presentations on Wednesday. This is the material you need to cover in your presentation.
Okay, and that's just basically just a gist of what our paper is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you don't have to have your paper done in order to present it.
Okay.
But you know, you should have this, at least this side, this information in your head and thinking about it as you.
So basically, the meat of everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also want to mention, I almost forgot this, the study guide for the final exam is available. It seems like, the final exam's still off, but it's less than a month away at this point. And so, of course, we have Thanksgiving in there, so there's, it's going to be there rapidly. Very much similarity in format. I do want to mention, now that I'm thinking about it, one aspect of the final that will be different than the midterm. I'll share my screen here in a minute. I wanted to get it pulled up first. All right, let's share the screen here. So, one significant piece of the final will be a research description. So there'll be questions about research, all the different parts of research, but then there will also be a section where I give you a research topic, I give you some options about that paper, or about that particular passage, And then you have to describe for me the steps you would take from finding your sources, all the things that we've talked about the whole way through. All right, so one part, a significant part, it's kind of like an essay. You will have to describe the research process. Now, if you have this information in the first section with the different terms, should be okay, because any of the information about a passage, I will give you the information you need about what you would write about. But from beginning to end, you will need to describe how that research project would be undertaken. Right? So describing how you would go about finding your sources, how you would go about evaluating your sources, talking about note-taking, citation. You won't actually have to cite anything in this section, but you'd have to talk about, right, I'd want to make sure that I cite my sources in SBL format, and here are the things that I would need in order to do that. And so essentially describing the entirety of how you would undertake a research project. And then there will be an essay. This is the essay that will appear on the exam. So that gives you plenty of time to prepare for that. Certainly if you want to talk about this, or if you want to send me an email saying, here are a couple thoughts I have, is this on the right track, that's perfectly fine as well. So keep those things in mind for the final. Any questions about that? I know we just kind of threw that out quickly at you, but it is, we're coming up to the end pretty quickly. If anything does come up as you're looking over all of that, like I said before, please feel free to get in contact with me about it. There were a couple of things I wanted to finish up with from last time, things that I kind of rushed through. I wanted to spend a little bit more time, not a lot, but just kind of spending some time bringing some thoughts together as we were talking last time about communicating clearly and thinking about how do I accomplish that in the context of my research paper. We finished talking about the body of the paper, what to include. I want to emphasize, of course, the importance of clarity. Remember, you are trying to communicate this to someone else, particularly, in this case, of course, to me. And so that might mean that while a lot of things make sense in your head, and you know what you are saying, you have to make sure that all of that is being communicated to me as the reader, because I'm not in your head. I only have what is on the paper in front of me, or what is, in this case, on the screen, because you just need to submit it electronically. You don't have to submit a physical paper. And so I only have what's on the screen, so you have to make sure that anything you're thinking of that you think would be important, that it gets on that paper, that it gets in your discussion. So you want to make sure that you're clearly communicating that information. Part of that is in thinking about moving from point to point. Your paper should be logically organized in such a way that your reader can clearly follow you. It shouldn't be a stream of consciousness type of paper. Right? I'm thinking about this right now, and then, oh, I got this other interesting idea, but then I come back to this idea over here, and I mean, that's okay to get started with. If you're just trying to get started writing, sometimes it's important to just write before you actually write. I know that kind of seems odd, but in trying to figure out what to say in a research paper, sometimes it's helpful to just start getting ideas down on paper or on a computer screen. But that's not what you want your final product to be. You want your final product to be a logical progression across the ideas that you believe are important to get across. In thinking about that, you need to think about what are the key ideas, the key concepts I need to completely and clearly explain to my reader what it is I'm trying to prove. And so you need to think about, okay, I'm trying to make this claim. What do I need to do? What do I need to write about in order to prove that this claim is true? That might mean I need to provide some background. Right? Maybe I need to talk about how this passage has been interpreted. Maybe I need to talk about the process of textual criticism. There might be some. If you're writing if you were writing a paper about somebody's thought, for example, right? This is what this person wrote about or thought about. You might need to provide a biographical background. Right? And so background material might be necessary to help prove your point. Examples would be another part that you might need to use to prove your point. And so here are some examples of the things that I've been arguing. You might need to do some reasoning or analysis and clearly communicate that to your audience as to how you are coming to these conclusions. Sometimes you might need all three of these. But you need to think about, all right, I'm making this claim. What do I need to do so that someone who's reading this, who's relatively intelligent, can come to the same conclusions that I've come to? Do I need to talk about or explain certain things? Do I need to provide several different examples? And this is the case in, if you were trying to write something about contemporary Christianity in the United States, do I need to say something about what it's like in the Northeast and the Midwest and the South? And so what examples demonstrate what I'm talking about? Connected with all of that, as we've mentioned several times on Monday, is the importance of transitions. Transitions are the way in which your audience follows you. They can be a wide variety of things. They could be phrases. Things like additionally, or for example, or moreover, or furthermore, or also. It could be numbering, as we talked about, first, second, third. Those transitions can occur in between paragraphs. And so I'm going to start off. There are three examples, or there are three possible options related to the interpretation of this passage. First, yada, yada, yada. Second, blah, blah, blah. Third. Or it could be within the paragraph. And if you're talking about something and it's relatively short, where you're not going to expand upon it, you might have, and here are three options, and three things to consider. Additionally, also, finally, those transitions help your reader understand. Is this a continuation of what's been talked about so far, or is this a contrast? Right? I talked about this. On the other hand, here's this other thing. So things like, additionally, we see Jesus' compassion and how he speaks to the adulterous woman. And when I see a phrase like additionally, I know this is added to, and this follows with what you are previously saying. This is a continuation. But if I see something like, on the other hand, what Jesus says to the Pharisees indicates his contempt for their actions. And not say, okay, this is a contrast. How do I know it's a contrast? Because you said, on the other hand. And so those transitions provide your reader clues to how these different pieces of your paper flow together, how they interact with each other, what you're trying to achieve. And then finally, we get to the conclusion. Conclusions can be very important. Sometimes it might feel like you get to the end of your paper and you just kind of run out of steam. I'm done. But the conclusion is important in order to do a couple of things. First, to tie up your paper. We talked about, I believe it was Monday, where the introduction lays out and says what you will say. The body says it. The conclusion says what you said. Now, that might seem kind of repetitious, but the idea is you have been leading your reader along a path in order to come to the conclusion that you have come to. The conclusion kind of the moment where you reinforce, now that you're at this point where you agree with me, here's what I've shown. Or it's that kind of last attempt to bring the audience on your side. So there's a couple of things that you want to do. Essentially, you want to summarize your argument. Again, say what you said. What is it that you have claimed at the beginning of your paper, and how have you shown that throughout the paper? Particularly with all of that, it's a good time to return to your thesis. Saying it maybe slightly different than how you said it at the beginning, but remember that thesis statement guides the entirety of your paper. And so the conclusion ties everything back into that thesis. In doing this, as you tie up your conclusion, one thing to avoid or try to avoid is introducing any new material. If you get to the end of your paper and you think, oh, I should have talked about this, well, go back and revise. Don't just throw it in your conclusion. Go back and include it back in your paper. Again, it's very important to recognize that revision is a very important part of the writing process. Nearly everyone who does any sort of writing for a living has to go back and rewrite. Now, certainly if you've been writing for years, you might not rewrite as much, but still, there is that need for revision. So, if you come to the end, don't just throw it in there. Put it back where it belongs, right? Put it where it needs to come in. So the conclusion should be tying everything up. You're finishing. You're drawing things to a conclusion. You're drawing things to a close.